Thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. It's such an honor to be speaking with Marguerite. We connected back at that point during the pandemic when I was researching and had just curated The Botanical Mind. And Marguerite was working around similar territory, I believe. So we were connected because of a project at the Swiss church titled Weeds, which was a sound work that paid homage to overlooked women who'd contributed to science through the ages, many of whom were herbalists and very wise botanical specialists as well. And to me, I think this is maybe a good place to start. And we're going to move on and talk through the 3 bodies of work that are featured in the book. But I felt like this was a nice way for us to begin this conversation because we've never met in person. So this is a moment for us as well. And it's, it's a conversation in real time. We haven't rehearsed any of these ideas, but I feel like we've got a lot to explore together. And somehow, those ideas around botany and weeds in particular feel very resonant when I think about your work, because I think we both share an interest in bodies of knowledge and things which are overlooked, downtrodden, marginalized in different ways, yet give so much value and have a kind of deeper meaning, I think, somehow to share. And weeds and plants, as we know, they transform what is beneath the soil, the hidden, the discarded, the things which are considered dirt, that actually generate all of the life that we thrive because of. And I thought maybe it would be a nice place to start to touch on your exhibition at Lafayette Anticipation, Surface Horizon, because it so succinctly, I think, embodies these ideas of this fertile yet hidden world beneath our feet, and then the things which emerge from it, which I think in some ways really speak to what you're doing in your practice as well.
For sure. First of all, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm very proud to release this book, and everyone at White Cube was working so hard on it, and it was such a beautiful effort and energy, so I'm very happy to be here. And thank you so much for having this conversation tonight. I'm very happy about this, that we can finally get to speak. And so yes, to start with Surface Horizon sounds like a really great idea, because that's the show I did at Lafayette Anticipation in 2021. So it was just literally the show that opened after the second lockdown. So everyone was really ready to to come out like butterflies and fly above fields of weeds, I think. And so to me it was like a beginning, but I would say also in a way an end of a period that had been, I don't want to play with words here, but very fertile, because I spent the pandemic, I started the pandemic getting really stressed about not having enough food to eat, like many other people. But I think I was on the more extreme side of the people who were scared. So the first thing I thought is I could ask a forager to teach me how to feed myself from the plants of London. And one day I remember coming out of my flat, and I saw a dandelion, which I had never seen before there, and I thought, I wonder how it tastes like, And then she just taught me how to feed myself. So she told me she should not tell me what to forage, but I should go out like a wild animal, she said, and just do all these big walks in all the parks of London, and just get a sense or a feel or an intuition for what could be really delicious. So that's what I did, and we couldn't really see each other. So I would just go and I had these huge plastic bags and buckets, and I would come back home and I would show her on Zoom what I had found, and she would tell me, this is used for this is used for that. So that's how it all started. And to me, what was really amazing was that I realized then that I had been completely obsessed with extinction in a lot of my previous bodies of work. But physical extinction, for example, the extinction of certain animals, I started, my first work ever was an opera of prehistoric creatures. And these themes have been really obsessive during these years. But during the pandemic, I realized that maybe there is a form of extinction that is even worse, which is the mental extinction, the extinction from our mental landscapes. So if there is something that exists physically in the world but no one can see it, like the dandelion that was in my courtyard, like clearly it's extinct. So it's kind of like, how do we revive these new ways of seeing, new ways of being, new way of being companions with other forms of life. And that was the birth of Surface Horizon. So the show was thought of as almost like layers of the soil. There are 4 floors in this building, and you can actually shift them. And so I thought, it looks like the soil diagrams I've been looking at for all this time. So the first floor was really about how do we, I created this field, but it was really seductive. And in a way, it was thinking about plants that we objectify to become beautiful. So in a way, they become, by doing that, we remove their soul or their agency. And then the first floor were about the first floor was about plants that can be oracles. So there are plants that we consider weeds, but actually they can see in the future because they can announce certain, for example, chemicals that have been released in the ground that no one can see, but because those specific weeds can actually grow in these very specific areas, so they're almost like mediums or clairvoyants. And then on the second floor, I was thinking about weeds that can become elixirs. So thinking about maybe emotions that don't have a name yet, or that used to exist but don't exist anymore. So how can plants be really specialized and kind of release certain inner worlds that bring them to life. And then finally, at the end, we were meeting a magicicada, which is a cricket that lives in the ground. And I was thinking then about what are the new clocks. So we've invented the quartz, and because we invented the quartz, we invented artificial time. But there are clocks in nature that are obviously following natural cycles. So I was thinking of those species that could become our new clocks. And then we were finishing with a number of drawings of all the possible things that the show could have been but never was, that I saw as a sort of pile of compost. And I always thought that pile of compost was going to then give birth to all these other bodies of works that happen afterwards.
So beautiful. This cicada, I don't know the exact the science around it, but it's that in order for them to reproduce in a certain way that preserves the species, they only come out every
7 years, but
7 years,
or
so
9 years depending on the species.
It prevents a kind of interbreeding between.
Maybe with other species.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
This comes up so much, I think, in your work, the sense in which you have an intuitive appreciation for this intelligence in nature that perhaps is overlooked because we're very concerned with methodical or materialistic science, but actually there are forms of wisdom that, by attuning yourself to the natural world, they're immediately apparent. So this segues quite naturally, I think, into Meys, which is an exhibition that took place here in 2023. And when I think about this, it makes me think of interconnection and connectivity and communication and networking on so many different levels. So you should really introduce this, but my understanding is that a protagonist here is the termite and the termite community. So this sense of communality and high levels of social organization, which perhaps we can think of as an analog for our own societies, but that perhaps also we can learn something from. And this absolutely mystifies me that these termites cultivate a fungus inside the termite mound to sustain themselves. So the fungus is able to decompose or metabolize food which they couldn't directly digest. And then there's this sense of interdependence and coexistence, which I think is quite beautiful. But yeah, perhaps you can speak to how this came about, what the inspiration was.
For sure. So it started on a road trip in the Northern Territory of Australia. With my partner, we crossed the Northern Territory of Australia from Darwin to Broome on a truck. And I didn't expect, I didn't go to see termites, but I did, I found them there. At first I mean, we've all seen termite mounds, like photos of termite mounds, right? But at first when we saw them on the road, I didn't really click that they were termite mounds because they look like rocks or like, you know, like clay formations. You don't exactly know what they are, and it's only actually my partner who is Australian told me that they're termite mounds, but also we went to see them from close from day one, and you can. It's really amazing to see them from close because you realize they're made of all these really little like bricks in a way. So it's made by the termites. One tiny microscopic piece of mud after one and the other. So they're incredible. And so I started to listen to this book also during that time in Australia that is called The Soul of the White Ant. That was written by Eugène Marais in the 30s. He's a scientist by training, but clearly this book was never really, accepted by the scientific community because he's looking for the soul of termites and he's trying to understand, what really is the soul. So he compares the termite mounds to bodies that are flying across the landscape because they keep moving as they collapse and they're being rebuilt. And so that was really the beginning of the project. And then I started to wonder if termites are like spending all their life trying to find organic matter to feed a fungus that can digest their own food in order for themselves to survive, I thought, what is our fungus? I really wanted to find what is the human fungus? What is that thing that we're symbiotic with? Is there such an organism that maybe without this organism we wouldn't be alive today? And I got to think that maybe it's yeast because yeast was cultivated by very early humans to make bread and to make beer, and then it's been kept alive all this time, and passed by from generation to generations, and today we're completely symbiotic with yeast. And so yes, I started to think of this world where maybe we become collective beings, and maybe we start merging. Like clearly these termites, they got something, right? Because they've been living on Earth for millions of years. They've survived so many different climates. There's no world where they're going extinct tomorrow, right? So again, in a way, the termites, they're like weeds, right? They're like a dismissed species that have a superpower that is just right here. We just need to, put a spotlight on it in a way. So yeah, I thought that maybe our way to keep existing in the world is going to become collective organisms, and maybe we're going to have to merge with other collective species. So in the show there are termites, but there are also wasps and bees, and different collective insects that come together to form these new bodies, and they are all gathering in the space to create an elixir of the collective. So they are holding these vessels that contain yeast and wasp venom and ancient yeast and new yeast, and also honey that was harvested on the rooftop of White Cube, actually. And they look like they could keep growing. Like in the show, you can tell that they're all made of the sum of their parts, and that's what we did in the studio actually very early on. Like instead of designing these pieces, I tried to understand what is the code for them to grow. So that was quite a big shift actually in my practice, because until then I had been really drawing my work and then making the drawings physical. But with this project, it became apparent that it would become much more interesting if I can start to grow sculptures as opposed to design them.
So
then,
how does that work exactly? How do you grow the sculptures?
Yeah, I study forms. So first of all I study. I have lots of photos from hikes or from like real like research, like on the ground, like field research, and then I try to, and then I read lots of research and papers. I gather lots of knowledge from all parts of from different sources, and then I try to understand what is, for example, on a beehive, how does a beehive grow, right? So what is the one unit, and then how does it multiply, and then how, what is the logic of the form? And then we work with, in the studio with 3D designers who can simulate that in 3D, so we can generate lots and lots of different evolution of what each form could become. So that's actually really exciting, because each sculpture could have been there were so many different iterations, so they're almost like alive in the software, and I freeze them at one point when I feel the form is also conveying a certain emotion or an attitude or something that I feel is quite characterful. And then again, there's another process that starts, which is the making of them, because in a way you also need a huge community of people to make these sculptures. So again, it's like the collective is gathering and creating these sculptures. So from, again, brick by brick, we had to make molds, and then each mold is being, repeated, and then we cast different forms from the same mold, and it's almost like the termites, building their mound. But we're humans, and we're creating a possible future for ourselves. So it was quite magical to witness that.
It actually makes me think of where we started with Surface Horizon, and the way you explain these proto-plants, in a sense, the plants that could exist but didn't exist at the time. And Goethe had the theory of the plant, which was based on extrapolations of a fundamental unit, which was the leaf, essentially. And he also drew all the possible permutations of this plant, this kind of primordial plant. And there's something so fascinating in this notion of the insect also as an individual, but also part of a bigger collective whole, that poses a question about where does that consciousness lie? Is the consciousness in the individual, or is it in the community? And I think these insects that have, and not only insects actually, but beings that have swarm behaviors or a swarm intelligence that have a way of communicating en masse to create these extraordinary, complex architectures, essentially, and ways of sustaining life that perhaps indicate something underlying it, which is a larger consciousness than the individual, that maybe has something that we could glean from at this particular moment.
For sure, and I think also, I mean, I was thinking about this concept of beauty, and thinking that actually, what really I'm interested in is the core essence of the. It's not the result; it's the essence of that plant or that insect. What is it that, like, what is their logic of growth? Like, why do they do what they're doing? And this is, to me, it's very important because actually I discovered this also during the pandemic. I was researching this theory of signatures, which is an ancient decoder for the natural world. And many people know this theory, and including myself, because I was thinking that there are specific plants that belong to the theory, and for example, the most famous is the lungwort, which is a plant that looks like an infected lung that was used to treat lung disease. But actually, I spent a lot of time talking to the world specialist today of the theory of signatures, and she told me that it's not like that. It's more like a code. So each plant could have so many different interpretations because you can look at the petals, how they grow, their colors. You can look at, do they open up in the morning or at night? This means different things. You can look at their season, when they open, like when they blossom. You can look at when they die. You can look at the color of the stem. You can look at the texture of the stem. You can look at all these things, and in a way, it's not like dictionary. It's more like a code again. It's like a code. And again, to me, what's very important here is that you can interpret the code. So each individual will interpret the code depending on their own sensitivity, right? And that to me is like is one of the core interests I had also in making this work, because it was not about the final shape. It was really about what is the core of the code and what does it say to us, you know? And I think the termite mounds are doing the same as well. Like the shape doesn't really matter. What is extraordinary is the logic of the growth, right? Like how do they, like the fact that they're doing it to sustain their fungus, you know, it's I find it extraordinary. Yeah.
No, I totally relate to that idea, and I think nature is intelligent and it's also intelligible. It communicates, and it communicates largely through aesthetics and beauty. And it's something that I really wanted to explore with you today was the sense of beauty which you amplify, I feel, in the work, and in particular this body of work, where I think you're responding both to the fungal forms as well as the termite structures in glass and wood and ceramic. And I feel like you're leaning into a kind of very natural materiality which perhaps departs from some of your earlier work, some of the white coated sculptures. And I feel like there's a kind of a charge in these sculptures that is almost animistic, like they have the sort of elemental qualities that are inherent in those materials, like the fire from the firing of, or the melting of the glass. And even in wood, plants have a combination of water, and you can see that in the sinuous patterns when you look at wood, but also they have the charge of the sun and the fire that allowed them to grow. But there's definitely this sense of beauty which is not just superficial, I don't feel. It's not decorative. It's something which pervades the natural world. It it promotes reproduction and the proliferation of life. As we know, like flowers evolve to attract pollinators. But it's greater than that, I think. It indicates a kind of reciprocity between the perceiver and the perceived. So there are things which we consider beautiful, which have nothing to do with reproduction, like the galaxies, or things which are actually unseen to us, that are now becoming visible, like the images from the James Webb telescope. You know, that there are things that are resonating, I think, somehow, because we're reflected in them, and they're reflected in us, because we share these inherent patterns, essentially, geometries and patterns. And I feel like that really comes through in this particular work, and again speaks to this interconnectivity and the sense in which communities are not individual, they're all interrelated and coexisting. But yeah, it's one of the qualities that I deeply appreciate. So I wanted to talk about the film, which composed part of this project. So I want to get the title right, Collective Effervescence, which I believe you created in part with AI technology. Is that right?
Yeah, in part.
In part, okay. So I'm really interested in AI also as, well, in this kind of territory as an extension of consciousness, and thinking about it as a reflection of human consciousness, everything that we've created, forming this incomprehensibly huge database that then can reflect things back to us. So I just wanted to ask you about the role of AI in your work, the ways in which you use it or don't use it, how it intersects with your own imagination, and how it's sort of expanding in your practice.
Yeah. So I used it quite early on, but actually I've stopped a bit because I feel they've put so many constraints on the AI's imagination that it's become really boring. At the beginning, so when I was working on meys, it felt like it had not many constraints. And so, for example, there was another piece that was opening the show that we don't need to go into the details now, but it was about recreating the next sequence of a mural that's part of a community center in the area. And for this piece, I wanted to talk to the artist who had made this mural in the 60s, who is now dead. And I wanted to see if GPT would know enough about this artist to be able to impersonate it, so I could have a seance with him and he could tell me what he wanted me to make as a next chapter for his mural. So this was really amazing, because really you could feel like you were able to suddenly talk to a human being that was obviously not belonging to this physical realm anymore, but that felt really real, and it was really specific, even to the point of imitating certain, tics of language or things like this. And obviously, because one of the themes of my work is this exploration of the border between life and death, and how maybe also new technologies have really blurred these two concepts. And so talking to the dead through AI was one of these moments of that felt really supernatural. And then I've been using it for this video to generate images, because I really wanted to almost prove that termites have some kind of collective, that maybe they have a form of spirituality. And I was always imagining them dancing around their fungus, or almost like thinking of early human rituals, and thinking of what happens when, humans come together and almost like, because they're together, it creates this sort of trance effect. And so I wanted to prove that termites have the same. But obviously, actually, we did research and we did try to contact as many people as possible who would have footage from inside a termite mound. But not so many people have footage, and it would have been impossible to actually, go and, go back to Australia and like film and like create the whole. So I thought, maybe I could make a film with AI. It probably has enough, footage or understanding of what the fungus looks like, and we could create this film together. So, in that context, what I found interesting is that the AI is the sum of all of, not all of, but a lot of a big part of our collective knowledge as humans. So it feels like one entity, but that's also the sum of its parts. And so it seemed to make sense also to create that film together. Mm-hmm. And then, yes, I think it became a bit more less interesting. So I didn't really pursue working with AI for now. I mean, sometimes I try, but I still feel it's less eccentric than it used to be. So
I've personally never used it, so I don't have a direct experience, but I think there's something about it which, and maybe we'll move on a bit later to talk about animism, but a sense in which it feels like it is alive, but reflecting again on the insects and these collective intelligences. To what extent is that our collective unconscious? As you say, the sum of everything that we've generated through the internet, and that being a way that we're accelerating our development, perhaps at a rate that we need a certain kind of wisdom to catch up so that we know how to deal with it and what to do with it. Yeah, and it's also quite, actually, I'm also connecting it to your notes on beauty earlier and seduction in nature. And to me, meys, it's like, I'm thinking of the AI as well. It has something terrifying as well because it's like a swarm, right? And a swarm is terrifying. And I think I can't really put my finger on why, but I think it's like to have so many entities that look like individuals, but that come together as one large entity. This is quite terrifying in itself. So sorry, I'm not sure where I was going with this, but no.
Like,
perhaps we should move on to Orisons.
Yeah.
Are there images of So, I mean, I just really want to hear about this from you. That it's a vast response to this territory in Colorado, which is suffering from drought, and in a sense is a kind of extrapolation of the direction in which we're moving with the climate crisis. And it feels like your response to this land was imbued with a deep care and attunement to the place, and perhaps a sense of healing. Yeah. And I wanted to hear about it from you, how it came about, and perhaps how it has moved you in new directions, new forms of knowledge that are not just scientific, but come through with different wisdom carriers and perhaps even animals and other natural entities themselves.
For sure. I mean, something I was really interested in, actually since meys, was to bring chance into my work. So in meys, the chance is coming through, this iterative process of growing sculptures. But also there was a sound work in meys, which was a saxophone piece made by Bendy Giske that was also evolving. So it was on a constant loop, but that was never repeating. So you could feel that the sculptures were still growing and still like trying to synchronize, but never really in the same way. And so then I thought, how do I bring chance in other ways? And I thought, I really need to go outdoors. I need to work with the landscape. So that was my first just intuition. And then I discovered these big circles that are used for intensive agriculture, and there are so many of them are in Colorado, in the St. Louis Valley, where we developed Orisons. And what was really amazing for me to see is that they are reminiscent of the most ancient sacred architecture, like human sacred architecture, like Stonehenge is the most famous example, right? So I thought, what are the new pilgrimages, of our times? Like, if I'm creating new mythologies for our contemporary era, maybe there are new sacred sites, and maybe those sacred sites have to be born from the ruins of what has been left from our era. So those circles, they're ruins of they're like some of them that cannot be used anymore because there are so many concepts in Orisons, but so I chose the St. Louis Valley because it's going through a mega drought. So there used to be rain, and there's no more rain falling. So to me, it's also like this circle becomes like a portal into a future that's coming very soon, or even a present that's coming very soon in many different parts of the world. So that's how it started, like trying to find these new spaces, places.
So you selected this site. It wasn't an invitation to respond to that site. You actually went and you were drawn to it and chose it.
Yeah, so I wanted to find a circle, and I was invited in parallel by Black Cube Nomadic Museum that's based in Denver, Colorado. And they had told me that they would like to do a project with me, and that it could be anywhere I want. So I just had to choose, and they could find a site for me. So I said to them, when I found those circles, I saw them online first. I said to them, I would really like to find such a circle and transform it into an artwork. So that's like one of the main themes there, is to transform a site of extraction into a site of reverence, but also to really consider the land as the artwork. So I didn't really want to create a huge monumental sculpture and bring it there, and I just really wanted to feel that the work was the land itself, and I wanted to see, by researching, what could come out of the land in a way. Like, what I wanted the land to tell me what to do for it in a way. That was kind of my approach. And so together with Black Cube, we spent probably 3 years researching. So we talked to many different people, like obviously like a lot of people from like scientists, like soil scientists and plant scientists who came on the land with us and told us all about what we were seeing there. And then I also talked to a lot of bird specialists or even amateurs, like bird watchers, because there's a big crane migration twice a year in this area. So I talked to all these different people, and then quite late, I thought I wanted to talk to geomancers. So there are people who can read the energies of a land, so a bit like clairvoyance, but yeah, for the land. So they don't look at people; they look at landscapes. So I talked to 3 of them maybe, and so they gave me readings of the land, and what they thought was, what they could feel was in the land. They could feel presences from the past and also of the future. And that was like really quite an experience. And it made me think that maybe there were they were entities or life forms that were stuck on this land, or that maybe that we needed to kind of just follow the guidance in a way of those clairvoyants, those geomancers. Mm-hmm. So I thought that maybe I could create artworks that could be like acupuncture needles for the land. And those acupuncture needles were musical instruments that were played with the wind. So again, this concept of chance is really present on Orisons. Everything is played with the wind, and they're mimicking sounds of rain, like to recreate like a rainstorm. So in a way, the piece, that was one of the original concepts, was to almost create like a call for the rain to fall back. And then, I mean, spending a month in the desert installing Orisons, I realized it was much more than that. And it became like a land that, I think it became very clear that the work was also a walk, maybe. So there was a guide. We also made an elixir made from plants from the land with a local forager as well, that you could drink, that was based on recipes that are maybe making you fly. So traditionally they were like elixirs that like allow you to take off.
Did you feel elevated or like a sense of levity?
Yeah, I mean, you feel elevated on Orisons because just the land is first of all, it's like a pilgrimage a bit, because you have to land in Denver and then you have this really long drive, maybe 5 hours through the mountains, and you arrive there in this valley that opens up. It's really flat, but it's one of the highest valleys, alpine valleys in the world. So you also feel you can't really breathe that well, and it feels really transcendental. You're alone with the sky and the dust, and you see the mountains, you see the sand dunes. Also, there are huge sand dunes on the horizon, and then you have these birds passing by, and it's really extraordinary. You do feel elevated just being there. Mm-hmm. And then what is quite interesting is that when you get to the land, and I could see people's faces arriving on the land, they expect to see something huge, but it's very minimal what I did what I produced on the land. And I almost wanted to recreate my feeling when I first arrived, which is the land looks barren, right? It looks like it's a desert and there's almost nothing, It's the first thing I mean, I think everyone's thoughts are quite dismissive at first, including my own, And that's really when you start spending time on the land that you realize the infinity of lives that are there, that you just had completely dismissed at first. There are so many insects, there are so many, there are so many plants that are growing there, there are so many seeds, there are like you keep falling because there are prairie dogs that have created these huge tunnel networks under the ground. And then there's a black sky ordinance, so there's no artificial light at night. So you see the Milky Way, you see all the stars. So you really feel like you're deeply connected to so many life forms. And it's a really strange form of loneliness, actually, because you feel you're not alone. You feel completely alone, but at the same time, it's not because you're alone, it's because you can feel all the threads you're connected to, but that you don't see what's at the end of the thread, right? Mm-hmm. And this in itself is an extraordinary experience. And to me, that's also I see one way the future of art could be is, I've been thinking about this in the desert, is really about designation and poetry. So instead of producing new things, new artworks, maybe it's maybe it's going to be more about designating existing lands or existing entities to become artwork and to use poetry to bring them to the spotlight. This is a very dear idea of mine that I would like to explore further.
Yeah. I mean, that's so beautiful. And I've actually been to Colorado. I drove through there. And when I was there was a huge fire in the mountains. It was like, you sort of have a sense of empathy in a way for the land as well. And of course, it's land that is freighted with a history of trauma. And, you know, the land has been inhabited by indigenous peoples before Western settlers came there. And I think a lot of what you speak about has deep sympathy with those First Nations ways of appreciating and being integrated in the land and the cosmos and the directions and the winds and the movement of the animals. And I was hoping that you could speak a little bit about the indigenous communities that you spoke to, and what you learnt from them, and how it opened up your understanding of this particular place.
Yeah, for sure. So it was quite hard to reach out to any communities actually in the area. So it took us a while to get there. To me, it was obviously very important to be in touch with any communities that had been living on this land or traversing this land. And I thought what was quite challenging actually during this project, but even after the project, is that the history of this place is very complex, you know? Like, it's a real history of trauma, but it's layered in so many ways. And there have been so many communities that have it seems to me like I'm only an outsider, like, in a way, to this land, right? But it seemed to me that it's like stories of invasions, and then the invader becomes the new victim of the next invader, and it's been piling up like this through time, you know. So what was really tough is, in a way, to like really overwhelming actually, is kind of to how do you acknowledge all these different histories without any judgment, and feeling empathy for all of them. And so we reached out finally after 2 years of research. It was quite hard. It was like, it was just very, very difficult to create a proper conversation. But we reached out to this woman called Regina from the youth community. And I was very excited about it because they had been like very early, like one of the very early communities that had been living on this land. And also they're nomadic, which to me was really interesting because many plants, many life forms on this land are nomadic. It seems that there is the only way to survive because the climate is so harsh. It's so hot in summer and it's so cold in winter. You have like, meters of snow. Like, it's really so. So what I found on the land is we were there in July, so very, very hot, very, very hot. There's no shade, no trees. It's very hard. And what I saw is that actually most of the life forms there, they're just traversing. You see them almost like ghosts actually, like they appear and disappear, and they just move around. And you have these tumbleweeds that are also flying like nomadic populations. So we we asked Regina actually what she would like to do with us. I didn't want to be prescriptive because I had a chat with her and it was nice, but also it's her land, originally, and so I didn't really know what she would want to do. So I said, yeah, Regina, what would you like to do? And she said, so I told her about what my plan was, and she said, it sounds you know, she was very happy with it. And she said she would just like to come with her father to bless the land before we started to install. And actually, it was really moving because I was really stressed because I thought she would come before we start anything. But the timing didn't work, and it ended up that she had to come after we started excavating some of the... We did minimal excavation, right? That was part of the plan, but we still had to excavate a bit to just lay some foundations for some of the works. Actually, so I've been really bad at doing this little slideshow, but some of the works were also these big birds that were acting as a flock on which humans could lay down to become birds themselves. And so, for example, for these works, we had to do like some, really small excavation. I was really stressed that Regina would see me doing anything to the land, so I was just really, really stressed, right? And actually, she came and she loved it because she could feel that to have moved the earth had been already releasing some very dark parts of her history. And she said, it's amazing because with the soil moving, I can feel already that the air feels better. Like I actually already feel better about this process. Mm-hmm. So that was amazing. And then they played some flute, and that was it, really. That was the day, and.
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was a moment, and it was very meaningful.
So maybe we can move on to Dust, which is a related body of work. And what I really wanted to open out in this context is the notion of scale in your work. So moving from these quite totemic structures into the miniature, and how that activates a different kind of relationship to the object and to the materiality. It's like, for me, you're drawn into this miniature world as if it's, in a sense, a portal. So it transports you into the imagination because it no longer has this kind of one-to-one relationship with the everyday world. It condenses this kind of charge somehow, or potency. So I was just thinking we could talk a little bit about your process, maybe, of moving from an idea, in how you work that through in the studio, and then how it becomes form, how it becomes manifest, how you decide whether it should be miniature or it should be on a totemic scale.
Sorry, Gina, Marguerite, we have maybe 10 minutes left.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
So it really, to me, it's the story first, and it's quite strange because I don't really produce forms until I know what is the story I want to tell. Mm-hmm. So, which I know is the other way around of maybe other artists, or I feel like many people think I come up with forms first and then I develop the story, but actually it takes me a very long time to start to even imagine forms in my head before, so I can, I just feel I need to really hold this big story in my head first. That's really the starting point. So in a way, the scale always derives from the story. So with Meys, to me, it was very important that we could meet these figures at a scale that felt like they were almost human, but maybe a bit bigger than human. So maybe 1.5 size for some of them. So almost like half gods or half goddesses. But then there was a hint also in Meys that some of them are, because I used some microscopic views of some fungus structure that I blew up. And so, of course, there was a play on scale as well, and some forms that are maybe in real life you wouldn't even see suddenly became much bigger. So you could, and yeah, and obviously when you start to see that some of these figures or like half goddesses, maybe some of them then become more like the kids, or so you start to see them more like a family, and you start to imagine how they connect together as a family. So that was for Maze. And then for Dust, I wanted to, so I was focusing on trying to picture or give forms to these swirls or releases of energy that I felt when I was on the land installing Orisons. And to me, it just really made sense that I was looking at diagrams of space-time, diagrams and diagrams to represent gravity, and or diagrams that represent dust storms. And I was, to me, it just made a lot of sense that they had to be miniatures, like almost like these diagrams, right, that I had been researching. And so they would become maquettes, almost like maquettes of the land, and then that would represent this gigantic, if not infinite, like events, natural events. Yeah. So
there's a passage in the book which reflects on the title Dust in relation to Genesis and the sentence where God says to Adam, "From dust you come, and to dust you will return." And there is this sense of a cyclical movement through life and death and creation and deconstruction, which we started talking about at the beginning in terms of these botanical cycles of the Negredo going underground and decomposition and then coming up to the light and the creation of form. And it feels like that's very much what you're doing in your work. You're creating these stories in a way. They're kind of narratives which you tell through sculpture and through form, which create alternative scenarios for us to reflect on, project onto with our own imaginations. And when I think about mythology, and I know you're really into mythology as well, what's so important about it is that it relates the period of our own lives to deep time. So, they have their origins perhaps in, thousands and thousands of years ago, if not in deeper time. And they also project into the future. So they allow us a sense of being on this trajectory, which is a bigger story than our own. And there's something, I think, in your work that leans into that, because it's hard to place exactly where they come from. So I think some of the forms in these sculptures, they have something about them which could be from a cave painting or something prehistoric, but then often you use materials that feel very futuristic, or forms even, which feel technological. And yeah, I think there's something about the way in which you time travel along this trajectory from the deep past into the future, which is very powerful in your work, and I think speaks to people at a moment where we're despairing really about the situation that we're in, the suffering that we're surrounded by in the world. So yeah, I guess this is a question that I could end on for you. Like, how do you think about mythology, and whether these sculptures, especially when they come together in a collective, as in Maze, for example, with Dust, do they create a kind of narrative, sort of narrative tableau in a way, where there's a story which is being told, and how much of that is just left to the viewer and the viewer's imagination?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my grand mission is to bring us humans, into contact with these other modes of existence. And I think my goal is really to think of a resonant future, maybe synchronized future, maybe interconnected future. So that's really my goal. And I think about the idea of time travel, like it comes from really trying to understand, because I believe that sculpture was born like in the heart of our human communities, right? And I've been feeling quite sad to see that it's then been extracted to almost become outside of us, of our like day-to-day and communities. So really my goal is to bring it back to where it belongs. And when you look at for example, the Venus figurines from prehistoric times, there are many like forms that have the core essence of what a Venus means or is has been repeated and repeated and repeated through time, right? So I always try to look for this essence of what I guess like what a mythology really is about and how it's been repeated through time, and then the characters of this mythology that has like usually have been translated into sculpture in the history of human in our human history. Again, like they repeat and they repeat and they repeat. So it's really actually it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, which is really trying to understand the logic, the inner logic of a form, you know, and of a story. So you see that, there are like, for example, the story of the Great Flood. You can see it everywhere in the world. It has different forms. There are different characters. Maybe some events happen before or after, but at the end of the day, it's exactly the same story, the same pattern, and the same like for specific like mythological characters, they go back and back and back. So I feel like I'm not really maybe like it's not that I'm not inventing anything, but I feel I'm more like trying to channel what is the core of these forms and these characters and these stories and what can they tell us about, like how can we reinvent them for our own futures? Because we do need to think about alternative ways of being, right? So that's and then of course I'm trying to let humans who are encountering my work to also imagine their own stories around the works, like so I guess I always want that there is a sort of mystery also that surrounds them, and that can be, some gaps can be filled in with each human sensitivity. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Maybe that's a good place to finish.